The witnesses of objectification. Provides those who have experienced the subjective nature of the object an opportunity to understand their own nature. Artwork media which does not convey subjective significance, e.g. photography, video of apparent self-objectification, automatically supports objectification. Artwork which conveys subjective significance, e.g. drawing, painting of apparent self-objectification, may be used to negate objectification. It is the natural perspective of an animal when and where it results in its highest evolutionary success rate. This is especially true of the human's natural relatives, and arguably humans themselves in relevant circumstances, such as when they are disrespected and there is no alternative operational mode in which they can ensure their line's survival. It is the natural state of mind when one does not currently have an object which the subconscious thinks it should have. An objectified experience is incomparable to a non-objectified experience, and therefore the question remains, why bother about it? When one treats others as objects, e.g. dismiss our responsibilities, one is more likely to accept the objectification of the objectified, including oneself. The tolerance of objectification provides a mechanism to keep people valuing others, e.g. working. Else, they are logically more likely to accept, be fooled by, the objectification of the objectified, including themselves, and as a consequence lose moral or social status, respect, trust. The tolerance of objectification, or implicit subconscious encouragement thereof, and its consequences for work ethic may be utilized by religion. The power of objectification is dependent upon the social environment of the observer, e.g. food intake, relationship status, temperance, temperature, etc., making it difficult to get an internally consistent opinion, let alone consensus, on the tolerance of objectification at any given point in time. Objectification has less effect on those who are sexually active, so objectification increases in proportion to the average sexual activity of a society. One's willingness to tolerate objectification may be dependent upon one's food intake, e.g. pig meat, chicken, etc. In an objectification tolerant society, its people are reliant upon pig meat to sustain personal acceptance of selfish mindset and behaviour tolerance, affected by its influence on the selfishness of our mind set and the resultant lack of desire for independence or change. Objectification cannot be sustained in some environmental conditions, e.g. bad weather, in nature without shelter, food and water being taken for granted, etc., strongly indicating the idea being presented is false. An experience of objectification, including the objectified themselves, makes our subconscious focus on another's body, object. An experience of the objectified makes or requires us conscious to focus on another's face, subject. If one has or is a good object already, it doesn't matter, and society can adapt to ensure this requirement is accounted for, relationship standards. When one has an apparent object, the consequences of apparent self-objectification weigh themselves out. Tolerance of objectification is only a problem when you don't have an object, or don't want to be an object. If people have continuous contact with other people, subjectivity, it doesn't matter, and society can adapt to ensure this requirement is accounted for, family, friends, phone, internet, etc. An experience of the objectified makes one's subconscious feel it is right to claim the presented object. Although this is the natural response, it is, however, rarely the intention of the objectified, and the majority of citizens know this, which then presents a logical contradiction, and a feeling of having been disrespected by the persons responsible for their objectification, whoever they really are. The natural reaction to having been disrespected by objectification is to fight, but this action, having been prohibited by modern society, presents another logical contradiction, often resulting in the internal corruption of the individual, or oppression, such as the introduction of new requirements, desires, all of these having little representation in an objectification intolerant society. Child abuse, stalking, kidnapping, animal torture, punishing the objectified, or our base animal nature. An experience of objectification upon immediate logical reduction may be easily transferred into an acceptance of the objectification of oneself or another, or an acceptance of their objectification at a later time, repression. Some forms of objectification may encourage violent, tolerant attitudes. An experience of media presentations involving the objectified makes one's subconscious feel it is right to claim the presented object, which cannot distinguish between the presentation and reality, which is also the point of a good media presentation. This is the natural response, and it may even be the intention of the objectified, if they themselves are responsible for their objectification. One of two outcomes may result as a consequence of this scenario. Number one, the inability to claim the object will lead the subconscious into a fantasy state. Or two, if the viewer happens to note both the subconscious reaction and the inaccessibility of the object, it will result in a feeling of having been disrespected by the persons responsible for the objectification. The natural reaction to having been disrespected is to fight. But this action being impossible, given those responsible for the objectification are not available for contact at this time, it may also result in the internal corruption of the individual. It is the abuse of the social construct and the good of the people within it. It relies upon the goodwill of another in the showing of respect without prejudice, to face the objectified, thereby subjecting themselves to a peripheral experience of objectification. Without goodwill, objectification would not operate, as the objectified would be shunned and outcast. Reduces total crime rates. Increases objectification-related crime with respect to total crime rate. Apparent self-objectification relies upon education that their objectification is false. Promotes escapism and retreat into fantasy worlds. Objectification presents a psychological challenge to view someone as an object without subjective significance, or to modify circumstances to correct this impression. Objectification in the media presents a psychological challenge to view someone as an object without subjective significance, and even correct them for this fact. Where this might involve a beautiful liar, who might also be small, and therefore disrespectful of one's physical strength, or a powerful freelance, who might also not wish to have children, and is therefore disrespectful of one's physical beauty. Objectification does not require sensory stimulus, visual or otherwise, although it is most often the effective way of communicating the challenge, creating the illusion. An experience of objectification can lead to the formation of unnatural desire in the subconscious to meet the psychological challenge presented.